Have you ever been watching a marathon and just thought, why that distance? 26.2 miles? It's so specific. It seems totally random, right? Well, today we're going to dig into the real story behind that number, and I promise you, it's not at all what you think.
So yeah, this is the big question. It's not around 25 miles. It's not an even 26. It's 26.2. It feels so arbitrary, but believe it or not, there is a very, very peculiar story that explains everything.
And here's the thing. Most of us probably think the answer goes way back to ancient Greece, with heroic messengers and epic battles. But the real reason for that last, agonizing 0.2 of a mile? Well, it all comes down to some royal kids needing a good view from their nursery. Seriously.
Okay, so before we jump into the history books, let's just talk for a second about what that extra distance actually feels like. Because if you're a runner, at the tail end of a marathon, every single step feels like an eternity.
And that's just the truth of it. That last stretch is where you hit what runners call the wall, where every single step is a battle against your own body. And as it turns out, a big piece of that final, brutal push was never even supposed to be there in the first place.
All right, so where does this story actually start? Well, for most people, the story starts way back in ancient Greece with a legend that gave this race its name.
So you've probably heard the classic story, right? The Greek messenger Pheidippides runs from the battlefield of Marathon all the way to Athens, announces Nike, victory, and then drops dead. But here's the key part for our story. That distance was roughly 25 miles, not 26.2, just 25.
And this is where things get really interesting. When the modern Olympics started up, they stayed pretty true to that legend. The first few marathons were all around 25 miles. The distance was kind of flexible depending on the city. So, how in the world did we get from a casual, about 25, to a super strict exactly 26.2?
Well, it all comes down to one single event, the 1908 London Olympics. This is where a simple foot race took a major detour, all thanks to a little royal intervention. You see, the original plan was super straightforward. A 26-mile course that started at Windsor Castle and ended at the Olympic Stadium. Easy enough. But they didn't exactly factor in the British royal family and, well, their very specific preferences.
Okay, so here's what happened. There were two main demands. First, the starting line had to be moved, so the little royal children could get a nice view from their nursery window. And second, the finish line had to be positioned directly in front of the royal box, so Queen Alexandra could have the perfect vantage point. Basically, it was all about getting the monarchy the best seats in the house.
All right, so with these new royal demands, the race organizers had to go back to the drawing board, get out their measuring tapes, and do a little math for the monarchy. First off, they had their baseline. The run from that new starting point at the castle all the way to the entrance of the Olympic Stadium was a nice, clean 26 miles. Simple, right? So far, so good. But then, they had to add the last piece of the puzzle. To get that finish line perfectly lined up with the royal box, the runners had to do an extra partial lap inside the stadium. And that little detour added precisely 385 yards to the race.
And there it is, the big aha moment. You take the 26 miles, you add those 385 royal yards, and what do you get? 26.2 miles, the modern marathon. Think about that for a second. An entire global athletic standard was created just so the Queen could have a better view.
Okay, so that explains the 1908 race. But why did that weird distance stick? I mean, why didn't they just go back to 25 miles the next time around? Well, the answer has to do with just how memorable the end of that race was.
Well, it's because the finish of that race was unbelievably dramatic. The first runner to enter the stadium, an Italian guy named Dorando Pietri, was completely and utterly exhausted. He collapsed. He got up. He ran the wrong way. He collapsed again. He was finally helped across the finish line by some race officials, which got him disqualified. But that image, that struggle, was broadcast all over the world. It completely captured the public's imagination, and with it, the strange new distance of the race.
So let's just recap this wild journey. It starts with an ancient Greek legend of about 25 miles. The first modern Olympics kind of kept that vibe. Then, in 1908, you get the royal detour in London that accidentally creates a 26.2-mile race. And because that race was so incredibly dramatic and unforgettable, a few years later, in 1921, the International Amateur Athletic Federation just went, you know what? Let's make that the official distance. And they did.
So, this all brings us back to where we started, the runner. The next time you see someone absolutely gutting it out in those last couple of miles of a marathon, just remember,
That last brutal stretch of agony? Yeah, that's not for some ancient Greek hero. That's a little thank you note to the British royal family. It kind of makes you wonder, what other parts of our world were shaped by such surprisingly small personal requests? Something to think about.